Thank you all for being here this afternoon. I'd also like to extend a very generous thank you to Alamos Gold for allowing me to present this material. It was generated during an 8-year period of exploration when I was the exploration manager for the project, and a 2-year period of underground development and production while I was the manager of underground geology. My talk today has two intertwined topics: the discovery history and the deposit geology of the San Carlos high-grade gold telluride system. I think this is truly a unique deposit. Gold telluride deposits are rare. They're usually associated with alkaline and volcanic complexes. This is a high-grade gold telluride system superimposed on a high sulfidation system. There are no alkalic rocks whatsoever. Now, I hope this photograph grabs your attention like these specimens grabbed my attention when I bought them from the local miners over 20 years ago. They immediately reminded me of specimens I'd seen from the Cripple Creek, Colorado gold telluride district, which routinely had samples where they roasted the gold ore and drove off the tellurium and left the gold as kind of scabs and incrustations on top of the rocks. So I asked the miners, where did they get these and what did they do to the rocks? So they kind of pointed toward one direction, towards San Carlos, what is now known as San Carlos, and they told me they had to roast these rocks to recover the gold. So this was the first suggestion that there was a gold telluride occurrence in the district. Now, extensive metallurgical work and geochemical work during the exploration phase revealed that this was truly a gold telluride system. It is completely blind with up to 500 meters of barren cover. It was found relatively late in the exploration history of Mulatos, well after the main Mulatos deposit had been delineated and was in production. There are two main high-grade occurrences: stratiform silicified breccia and a structurally controlled veinlet system mostly consisting of horsetail veinlets that are extremely high grade. The deposit has very complex ore controls for the high grade, and the post-mineral geology is also very complicated. Okay, let's start with the regional setting. The Mulatos, or the San Carlos deposit, is located in the Mulatos high sulfidation district, which is, which is located in the Sierra Madre Occidental volcanic province, which is a thick sequence of mid-tertiary volcanic rocks hosting numerous occurrences and deposits of precious metal epithermal mineralization. The majority of these are low sulfidation silver deposits, but there are at least two important high sulfidation districts, El Salsal and Mulatos. The Mulatos district is the largest and most productive high sulfidation district in Mexico. It has two operating mines: the La India mine up here in the northwestern portion, owned by Agnico Eagle, and the Mulatos mine on the eastern part of the district, controlled by Alamos Gold. These two mines have cumulatively produced over 2 million ounces of gold by the end of last year, as at the end of last year. The district contains numerous occurrences of classic high sulfidation alteration, of silicic alteration, advanced argillic, and argillic, most of which contain gold occurrences or gold deposits. So let's focus in on the Mulatos district here itself. This is the greater Mulatos deposit footprint with showing the distribution of gold in silicic alteration in red. Greater than 3 grams per ton gold is shown in yellow, but what you can generally see is just a big cell of mineralization down here on the southwestern portion with two northeast trending arms or trends of mineralization. The San Carlos deposit is located here at the very end of the northwest or the northeast trending structural trend. There are two operating open pit mines, one here, the main Mulatos pit, and the El Victor pit. These two pits have produced 1.68 million ounces of gold at the end of last year, by the end of last year. So what I'd next show you is a longitudinal section along this northern-northeast trend. As you can see, all the mineralization occurs in a stratiform unit that is underneath a generally, but not always barren, volcanic package. The San Carlos deposit is over on the extreme east end right here, east of the Mulatos River, and under increasing barren cover. This is an overview of the greater San Carlos underground mining complex. The material over here at the lower left is ore grade material in the El Victor pit. There's a drill rig here for scale, starting the first bench of the Victor open pit. The San Carlos portal is located right here at the base of a stratiform silicified unit right in here. It's lenticular and dips underneath barren cover to the east. You can see the regional dip here. This is all barren cover. The area of high-grade mineralization is predominantly under this area of intense drill disturbance, but extends over 900 meters to the east on the right-hand side of the photograph. Okay, the exploration history, there's approximately 8 years of exploration leading to production. We started in 2006, kind of had a sporadic drilling campaign for 3 years, mostly plagued by land access problems that were straightened out in 2010. We conducted exploration in earnest about 2010, found the stratiform silicified breccia, which was kind of the key point to discovering the deposit, and we identified several en echelon high-grade sheeted veinlet zones. We continued exploration through 2014, stepping out to the east and found the far east zone. We started underground development in 2014, and production has been ongoing since early 2015 when 95,000 ounces of gold produced. I'd like to take you through the evolution of geologic thought that led to the discovery of the main deposit. Those high-grade samples I showed you at first came from these stopes here. These are old historic workings, but not that old. They were mined from 1960 to about 1980 by small local operators. And what they were doing was mining extremely high-grade veinlets. They might have been centimeter size. I think the biggest vein that the data shows was 30 centimeters. So what they would do, what they would do is follow any one of these little high-grade veinlets as far as they could. There were areas where the veinlet density was sufficient to allow for bulk mining, and they had some large stopes there. But basically, any planar feature you see in either one of these photographs is a high-grade veinlet. It might just be centimeters wide, but very high-grade. So we first started by surveying the underground workings and conducting geologic mapping. The first thing it showed was the veinlet zones were quite wide and potentially amenable to bulk mining. So this entire stope here was crossed by high-grade veinlets that the miners were following. But one of the key things we found was the veinlets were controlled essentially by this contact, sort of a stratiform contact between intense silicic and intense argillic alteration, with the stope generally following that contact. Now, as that contact dipped about 30 degrees away from our field of view here, within the structural zone, it suggested it was wide open to the east. So I'm going to show you a series of plan maps showing how exploration progressed leading to the discovery. This was our starting point right here. So the San Carlos portal, the San Carlos portal is right here, the old portal, production portal. The high-grade samples came from this area right in here. And then Kennecott had drilled about 12 holes in the area as part of a regional drilling program in the early 1990s. And they found a narrow zone of high-grade structurally controlled mineralization as depicted by that dotted line. So we put some geology onto this and some targeting, and we recognized the primary northeast control extending from Mulatos is the fundamental control of mineralization. And the underground mapping showed that that stope is actually kind of a horsetail zone with northwest trending control on the western portion and east-west control in the eastern part. It was totally separate and distinct from how you would line up the drill hole intercepts from Kennecott. But the third factor used for targeting was that contact between silicic and argillic alteration. It dipped from the outcropping exposure next to the river into the hillside to the northeast, about 30 degrees. So it kind of made this big, broad circle of favorable targeting for the drilling. So basically what we had was a three-way intersection in this area here where three factors came together. We followed up with the first phase of drilling and hit significantly thicker intervals than Kennecott had hit, and with about a 50-meter interval of almost 5 grams. And the drilling defined a broad area of greater than 100 grams per ton meters grade thickness, kind of open to the northeast. Later drilling found or discovered that this area of greater than 100 gram per ton meter grade thickness was actually this stratiform silicified breccia, shown by this purple pattern here. We also found several other zones of high-grade structurally controlled mineralization, and found that the zone that the miners had been exploiting here was actually quite wider than the stopes indicated. The key to the economics of this was the discovery of this stratiform silicified breccia. It had uniform high-grade gold grades, very robust economics, and it actually optimized a pit on the deposit. We continued exploration to the east, and came up with the configuration of the deposit as it's known right now. There are 3 cells of mineralization: the west zone that's being under production right here, a central zone also under production, and a far east zone that is pending for development and production. There's over 900 meters of total strike length to this sort of east-west trending zone of high-grade mineralization, again cross-cutting the northeast trend of the high sulfidation style alteration and mineralization, and the zone is cut by a fault to the east. Okay, let's jump into the deposit geology. The ore minerals are native gold, the simple gold telluride calaverite, a mineral I never heard of before I started working on this, with altai, it's a lead telluride, coloradoite, the mercury telluride, and petsite, a gold silver telluride. The gangue mineralogy is simple and pretty uniform throughout the deposit. It's quartz, pyrite, dicite, barite, pyrophyllite, and forget that last mineral. I don't know what I was thinking when I did that. But it's there, but it's not a gangue mineral. There's sort of 4 different types of mineralization: an early low-grade, high sulfidation style with gold in silicic alteration. It's not really of economic importance, except that our waste development really isn't waste. It's low-grade leach ore. We send it to the leach pads. The most important aspect is the stratiform silicified breccia. Superimposed on the silicified breccia are very high-grade sheeted veinlet swarms and horsetail veinlet systems. There's also an occurrence of veinlets in another stratigraphic unit above the main horizon. There's a post-mineral mafic dike and sill complex superimposed on top of the deposit, and there's a low-angle fault that's very early in the deposit history that displaces part of the deposit. So I thought I'd start with the good stuff, the high-grade gold. This is coarse calaverite in silica here, in barite, and in dicite. This mineral looks like pyrite, but it's 56% gold. It's very hard to recognize visually. I looked at 800-gram material, and I couldn't see anything. It just looked like pyrite. But this was a rare, coarse example of coarse calaverite. There is native gold in the system occurring as fine-grained concentrations. This is gold in barite with late dicite on top of the barite, cutting in a veinlet, cutting intensely silicified breccia. And we often see gold telluride, calaverite, and native gold occurring together. This shouldn't happen. They're precipitated in totally different conditions. So I think there was a really unique situation where the gold and the native gold and the gold tellurides were co-precipitated, kind of like on a phase diagram, a phase boundary and a phase diagram. But miners don't care about that kind of stuff, so I can't. Barite is the most important gangue mineral. It is always associated with high-grade gold. And we often see inclusions of gold tellurides and native gold in the barite crystals. They almost co-precipitated. This is truly a gold telluride system. There's over 19 different telluride-bearing minerals in the deposit. There's some pretty wild ones, some nickel tellurides, iron tellurides, native tellurium. There was a lot of tellurium in this system. There was also a lot of bismuth. There are 6 different bismuth tellurides in the deposit. But calaverite is the most important mineral. It dominates free gold about 2-to-1 ratio. The altite is very abundant, but again, I can't tell you what altite looks like. I've never really seen it in the deposit. Okay, let's look at the deposit geology. This is a diagram simplified from a lot of underground and surface drill data plus underground mapping. The silicified breccia occurs as a stratiform unit with a dome-shaped top. It is intensely silicified. It is surrounded by advanced argillic alteration with the intensity increasing over the top of the deposit. The ore grade mineralization is in the upper portion of the deposit with highest grades right at the contact or right below the contact with overlying argillic alteration. These irregular rectangles here, subvertical, are the long hole stopes used to mine the deposit. The grade decreases gradually downward until you reach an economic cutoff where it doesn't pay for underground mining. Superimposed on the silicified breccia is this high-grade veinlet stockwork. It straddles the argillic silicic alteration contact, like what I showed you in the underground workings, with grades decreasing vertically upward and downward. The highest grade is right at that contact. Now there's one really important point here. Note all the gold's at the top of the system, and this is something we've seen repeatedly in the Mulatos district. The conventional wisdom is gold's in structural feeders, not in our district. Gold's at the top of the systems. It kind of behaves like an oil field trap, I think. They're late stage fluids that get trapped for some reason in a structural, stratigraphic, and probably chemical boundary. The high-grade mineralization is cross-cut by this mafic dike swarm and sill swarm, and it is cut off by a pronounced low-angle fault at the top. I next want to show you a north-south section through the deposit. Again, lenticular silicified breccia. We drove a stope top cut through the center of the deposit and encountered a 95-meter interval running 33 grams per ton. The top of this thing is really high grade. The other thing that the development drift showed was the presence of the high-grade sheeted veinlet zone. We hardly had any intercepts in the drill holes here, but it was really well developed in the development drift. So the drilling actually underestimated the grade, especially of this sheeted veinlet zone. I want to show you some typical examples of this high-grade mineralization. This is the silicified breccia. It's a multi-stage breccia. The red you see here is from an early breccia event where the matrix is intensely silicified with red silica. It is overprinted by the main ore stage breccia, which has abundant dickite in the matrix, so it gives this mottled look to it. The matrix can also have a lot of pyrite in it, but the pyrite is mostly in the bottom, the basal portion of the deposit. It's lower grade. So dickite is the best visual guide to high-grade mineralization. This is one of a typical example of the sheeted veinlets. It's cross-cutting a silicified breccia. with a low-angle fabric in this exposure here. It consists of tens to hundreds of individual millimeter to centimeter size veinlets of dickite, barite, and gold telluride. Those veinlets run 400 to 500 grams per ton if you just sample the veinlets. But the key to ore control is having sufficient density to pay for the rock, to pay for the whole volume. This particular example ran 95 grams over 5 meters. As I mentioned before in the historic workings, the veinlets are extremely well developed at the contact between intense silicic alteration and overlying advanced argillic. There often is a little bit of displacement on that contact, and the veinlets blossom out with dilatant zones and anesthetic zones at the contact, producing very high grades. This also produced 95-gram material in the stope. Another example here, silicic alteration below advanced argillic, barite porphyroid or barite dickite veinlets, 800 grams per ton within the veinlets, allowing for a bulk round of 55 grams per ton. These veinlets over several meters mimic what main veins do over tens of meters or hundreds of meters. There's dilatant zones, they pinch and swell, but again, over just several meters. This is a dilatant zone where those high-grade samples came from, 2.6 kilograms per ton gold. You can't predict these things, they just pinch and swell, come and go. We get significant widths over the horsetail sheeted veinlets. This is about 25 meters wide, running about 25 grams. You can see the planar fabric imparted by the veinlets, which are just several millimeters to maybe several centimeters wide. Superimposed on top of all this high-grade mineralization is this late post-mineral mafic dike swarm. These are mafic dikes that are extremely mafic, I think almost lampropheric in composition. They cross-cut 30 to 50 gram material here. There have been over 40 dikes found in the underground development to date. And they're the only dikes known in the district. And I think even though they're post-mineral, they exhibit a strong spatial relationship to the deposit. The dikes feed into sills in the overlying fault zone. The Alamos has dated these dikes at 28.5 million years, which provides a minimum age for the deposit, but also indicates that low-angle fault zone was active at that time because there's the dikes enter the fault zone, they're also sheared, so that fault zone is active when the dikes were being emplaced. This is a view of the top of the mineralized zone, high-grade sheeted veinlets in advanced argillic alteration here. The top is dipping to the east about 30 degrees. It has one of the sills here, and then we have the hanging wall fault zone here. This creates some mining challenges in that you try to put the stope top as close as you can to the shear zone here without touching into it because you get severe ground control problems. I'd like to next jump to the central zone, which is kind of a variation of the same theme. The far east zone hasn't been developed yet, but I think the central zone and what I've presented in the west zone are representative of what will be found. Again, high-grade sheeted veinlets, but it lacks silicic alteration, and notice there's no pervasive advanced argillic alteration. The only alteration are these thin bleached envelopes adjacent to the veinlets. This is essentially fresh, pink, lithic lapilli tough rock in between the veinlets. And as you might expect, the grade's quite a bit lower. This face runs approximately 8 grams per ton, but it's still sufficient for mining. This zone has very strong stratigraphic control. It is in the basal portion of a unit 25 meters above the previous mineralization, and it pinches above and below that unit. The zones, there are 6 zones identified from 2 to 10 meters wide, and this presents challenges for both exploration and production in that you're looking for a 10 to 15 meter high box that is 2 to 10 meters wide, plunging approximately 25 degrees, 300 meters below the surface. This is an example of the tight stratigraphic controlled, structurally controlled mineralization. The view I showed you before, that unit with hosting all the mineralization is here in the floor. There are two unreceptive thin units above it, vitric tuff and crystallithic tuff. And look what happens to the zone. It's about 1.7 meters, 7.5 meters wide here, comprised of, say, 6 to 15 centimeters of 400 gram material. It goes into a zone of 1.5 meters of almost 200 grams, and up here it's about 6 centimeters of 900 gram material. But imagine what a drill hole would show through here. If there's just a slight deviation, if you were to go up here, you'd hit a thin interval that would be of no interest. If it was too steeply inclined, you'd miss the structural zone below it and miss the deposit or the zone completely. And it almost is luck to get it right through the core of the deposit. I thought I'd throw a few items for thought in here of things we've learned through exploration in the district. And I think I was struck by how common these themes are between all the presentations I've heard here. Discovery is possible in mature districts through exploration persistence and attention to detail. And one bit of advice I have is thoroughly understand the controls of the known mineralization. And one thing we've seen time and time again is significant deposits occur as blind mineralization, often stratigraphically controlled. And I think it's really important to learn the area stratigraphy in detail. Now, the prevailing thought is high-grade gold is always in the structural feeders. Well, in our district, the structural feeders are barren. All the gold's at the top. The high-grade, late-stage gold is at the top of the system. And then there's I always like these large systems because there's strong potential for high grade. It's hard to find, but when you find it, the economics are usually very robust. Also, in high sulfidation systems, the prevailing conventional wisdom is you need oxidation to have an economic deposit. We have two extremely high-grade, bonanza-grade deposits in the district. They are completely unoxidized. They're in 100% sulfide ore. They have the highest recoveries of everything, plus 90%, because the gold came in late and is free milling. So not all sulfide is bad. And the key is drill, drill, drill. So I'd like to thank you for your attention this afternoon. I'd like to thank Doug for putting on an excellent conference. And can I go back? Oh, and I wanted to thank, there's a lot of people to thank in this, but that miner I showed the picture of was Jesus. I learned everything I know about high-grade gold and underground at San Carlos from him. And I also had the opportunity to work with a great exploration team and an underground production team that are too numerous to mention. But thank you much for your attention. Bill?
Hey, Ken, two questions. What's the trend of the sheeted veins?
They're generally east-west trending, but they have horsetails where they swing to the northwest.
And then a mundane question, how old is all that stuff?
That's a good question. Pre-28.5 million years.
Yeah.
John Mark probably has a better idea. He did some early dating on his thesis. I think Alamos has done some recent dating that got some really old ages. I'm a little skeptical of the old ages.
But it's uncertain at this point.
It's very uncertain, I think. Any other questions? Oh,
just for curiosity, sir.
Oh,
do you take some selenium values?
You could see there was some selenium in those gold, or some of those telluride minerals. We really haven't looked at selenium, but the metallurgical work showed that selenium is present. But I can't. You know, I was amazed at the amount of tellurium in the system, and I hadn't looked beyond that. Dave?
Thank you.
Have you drilled any holes that have significant amount of mafic intrusion that do not have gold mineralization associated close by?
You know, if you look at the general distribution, there's always mafic dikes near the high-grade mineralization. It's not a one-to-one thing. It's just they're always there. Yeah, yeah. I wish I had a good answer to that. It's an intriguing issue, and I think it's part of the whole. Excuse me?
You haven't drilled any holes that have hit significant intrusions? and
No.
gold?
No. Well, I guess the dike swarm extends outside of the deposit, and it really hasn't been explored. We've got another, or we had another target in that area. John Mark?
You've really given us a gift. You've actually given us 100 years of knowledge. If you go back and look at Emmons' reports
Yeah.
of the Goldfield District, the descriptions you're describing are the hand-drawn color gold pictures as he showed in the Goldfield District. You also give us in Lepanto as well,
Yeah.
in the silicic barite zones there, in the Victoria zones. What you're describing is actually some of the things that they mined 150 or 200 years ago. So the pictures of those stopes that you're showing us now, it's actually a gift of a century or 2 centuries
Yeah.
ago of what you've seen. And it fits to those pictures and those maps.
You know, I was interested in looking back at the Goldfield material when I saw Goldfieldite in the metallurgical report. But,
I have the book. I'll share it with you.
okay, great.
Also about the stratigraphic control. As you say, you go into the advanced argillic and you lose the mineralization, or why do you think that's happening? Is it really a rheological control that's causing that?
Yeah, I think that rheologic contrast at that contact localized most of the high-grade mineralization. And one thing I didn't mention, because it gets too detailed, but that low-angle fault actually displaced part of the deposit. And that central zone actually, now I think, is the top, the displaced top of the deposit. The alteration's weaker. It was just higher up in the system. Jim?
Are the breccias hydrothermal breccias?
Almost certainly. They're superimposed on some sort of volcaniclastic material. So maybe you noticed a breccia pattern or fabric in some of the clasts. That's, I think, more of a volcaniclastic sediment or material, but I think there's clearly multiple stages, maybe up to 4 stages of hydrothermal breccias in the deposit. It's actually, interestingly enough, one of the few places we see true hydrothermal breccias in the greater Mulatos deposit.
Another question, as far as the mafic dikes, is there any orientation, like in Cripple Creek, for example, the relationship between the lamprophirs and the gold?
The dike swarm is really uniform. Almost every dike has a north 10 west orientation, vertical, but it always cross-cuts high-grade mineralization. They occur in the same place, but you can't draw a clear correlation. And they're unaltered. The dikes are unaltered. So I think they use the same feeder, deep-rooted feeders and there's probably some kind of weird intrusive at depth. But it really is a unique system. Yes, sir. It isn't easy. We have a gravity mill, and so we were able to concentrate, or Alamos is able to concentrate the Telluride minerals, free gold. They used an intense cyanide leach to recover it with sort of mixed results. So right now they're shipping concentrate to a smelter. I think the concentrate runs 100 grams per ton. I don't know where the smelter is or anything, but it's direct ship concentrate now. And they get most of the gold that way. Yeah?
Just wondering what the tellurium content is at the main Mulatos. Is it high, is it noticeable in your assay data at the main Mulatos deposit?
You know, most of that data was generated early, like in the 90s by Placer Dome, and I don't think people paid much attention to it. There is some metallurgical work where there were some gold tellurides identified, but they were pretty minor, or rare is the word I think I'd use. I don't think it's very abundant. So this deposit clearly was superimposed on top of the typical Mulatos style, highly silicified pyritic mineralization.
And those mafic dikes, are they potassic?
I don't know. We didn't do any petrographic work on them. It just, hand sample, they look as mafic as can be. They fall apart if in 2 or 3 days out in the elements. You know, that there's something weird about them. They may be lamprifers, I don't know. Maybe Alamos has done some petrologic work on them, but it's interesting. Thank you very much.